Lesson 1-6, Scatter Plots. A scatter plot has points that show relationship between two sets of data. This graph that you see here is an example of a scatter plot. The dots are scattered around the graph. Typically, you will see where they're in kind of a area where they're close to each other, but sometimes the dots can kind of be scattered all over the page. So it really just depends on the relationship, and we'll talk a little bit about more of that later. But here you can clearly see that the more days lead to more weight, although the relationship is not perfect. So it's not in a perfectly straight line, you know, like we would like to see like this, but it is in enough of a line that we would say that there is a consecutive relationship. When we're looking at scatter plots, we can draw a best fit line, or a trend line is also what we can hear. And typically what you try to do with a best fit or a trend line is you try to have the line to as close as many points as possible and have an equal number of dots above or below the line. So for this one, I may draw my line kind of through here, where I try to have enough. As you can see, I have a little bit more above the line than below. So kind of a better way to draw a best fit line for this one might be more like here. So now I have, you know, maybe 2 or 3 dots below and 3 or 4 dots above. Pause the video to plot the points below and draw a best fit line. So I've made the graph with the temperatures across the bottom and the money values up the side. So the first one is 14.2. So I'm going to plot these points, and you can just check yours with mine. So 14.2 for 215. 16.4 for 325, 11.9 for 185, and these don't have to be perfect, 15.2 for 332, 18.5 for 406, 22.1 for 522, 19.4 for 412, 25.1 for 614, 23.4 for 541, 18.1 for 420, 22.6 for 445, 17.2 for 408. So here we have our graph. Now if we're trying to draw a best fit line, we're going to try to draw a line that goes up the middle with as many points above and below as we can get. So that's about as best fit as this graph can be. When we are looking at scatter plots, there's 3 types of relationships that we can see in the graph. You can see a positive relationship, which is this example over here, and this is when the x increases and the y increases. So as the x increases, the y increases. So the graph kind of goes in a positive kind of upward motion. And then we have negative, which is when the graph starts at the top and works its way down. So we would look at it as a downward motion, so a negative. That's when the x increases but the y decreases. And then the last one is there's no relationship, and this is where the points are just kind of scattered all over the page. We don't see a distinct line going up or down like we did in positive or negative. Pause the video to identify the relationship of each graph. So let's take a look at the first graph here in the top left-hand corner. We can see that it looks like the line is going in a upward direction, up toward the right. So we would say that this one is positive. The one down in the middle is kind of scattered all over, so this one would have no relation. And then the one here to the top right is going in that downward motion, and so we would say that this is a negative relationship. So we're going to look at this set of data and this example of a scatter plot, and we're going to analyze this data. To do that, we are going to first kind of make a conclusion about the relationship of the graph. And so if we're looking at this graph, we can tell that it's going in a negative direction. So we would say that as the temperature increases, the number of cups sold decreases, which we know makes sense. As it gets warmer throughout the day, less people are going to want coffee. So this does have a negative relationship, and if you had to describe that relationship, you would say as the temperature increases, the number of cups decreases. And you will have to write that out, so make sure that you understand that. Then the question there says, predict the number of cups sold if the temperature is 30 degrees. Well, if you look at our graph, our temperature only goes from 35 to 75. But we see that as the colder it is, the more cups are sold, and the warmer it is, the less cups are sold. So we could say that 30 is approximately in here somewhere. So if we followed this graph, we would follow it straight up, and we would see that it's going to be somewhere between 40 and 45 cups. We don't know exactly how many, but we can estimate that it's between 40 and 45 cups.